When lost in the dark and cold, look for the light shining off the fragments of silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. And not just any installment, we have hit the season finale on our 20th broadcast season. So, that's a bit of a milestone there.
I'd break out the fireworks, but I'd burn my bed down.
I'm like, that's what you would get for lighting fireworks indoors and in your room.
Yeah, that's...
you go outside to do that.
Yeah, that's much less fun. I mean dangerous. I mean fun.
You have a very odd definition of fun.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I should probably see somebody about that.
Does your healthcare cover therapy?
Yeah, but there are some things therapy can't fix.
Clearly. Maybe a wrench to the head. Anyway. Joining me as always are Petty and Golix. Let us get to the news. Petty, since you've piped in, why don't you start things off?
The news is still a thing, both, nationally and not.
Look, that's just going to be a constant for the next XD amount of years.
Yeah, hopefully sooner than later, but I get you. Let's see. I did procure me a Sora amiibo when we went to Best Buy this weekend. And also, people may notice that I may sound weird. It's because I have a brand new headset that I also got this weekend at Best Buy. It is a Razer Black Shark V2 Pro. So it's weird because I've never had aviator headphones before. I've had the more gamery, solid bars.
What do aviator headphones consist of exactly?
They're where they attach to the headphone itself. It's more open and there's a lot more pivot points in there. So instead of just being hard onto a bar of metal or plastic, they actually cup around your ear a little better. I don't know if you've ever seen the bomber radios, headphones they have, especially back in World War II. These are those style headphones.
I see.
The ones that completely enclose your ears.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but they're not they have more ways to move around. So it's one of those things that
Trials of Mana.
I can definitely tell that they're a little higher quality than what I had before. And the mic is definitely, if you can't tell, very different. So it's one of those I've been spending the last few days getting my microphone settings dialed in to, make it so it's less jarring. Because before, oh god, I would have blown you guys out if I was doing what the just basic defaults. So yeah, I've been tweaking audio settings, and that's been, I want to say fun, but we all know that's a lie because dealing with settings is never fun. So that's been, I think I have them dialed in now. If anybody notices this, if it's too weird, let me know. There are still some settings I can tweak if I need to, type deal. As far as this weekend plans, well, I guess upcoming kind of for also off, like while we're off. Specifically this weekend, I should be able to head to the card shop and do some Digimon stuff in person, which that'll be a fun change of pace compared to the bleak dystopia that has been the past week. And also, after seeing the doctor on Monday, I was recommended to have something called a hydrogen breath test. It's several 3-hour appointments, specifically 3-hour appointments back-to-back weekly, to kind of monitor, like, if I'm lactose intolerant or if there's, like, an overgrowth of bacteria in my small intestine. Basically, I blow into a balloon after they give me a cup of some type of medicine, and then they, like, take samples of it every few hours, and kind of just, it lets them know like what's up with going on with inside my stomach. If it's just IBS, if it's Crohn's, if it's bacterial overgrowth, if I'm lactose intolerant, try and narrow down why I've been having this frequent abdominal pain. So hopefully they can find something out and it's something relatively easily treatable and not, you're going to deal with the risks for the rest of forever. Good luck! So that's been... It's more having to stay there for 3 hours, and there's a specific diet I have to do for, 2 days leading up to it. So, it's a pain in the ass. Are you good, Gullix?
Yeah, why?
It sounded like you were, breathing heavy into your mic. I didn't know if something was up, or...
I might have been a little bit, sorry.
But yeah, I guess outside of that, not a whole lot of stuff planned for the break. So I'm gonna try getting back into Digimon this weekend, depending on how I'm feeling, but we'll see on that. And I guess next victim.
Well, Gollix, that'd be you.
Well, I've been continuing to try to gather the energy to continue to exist in the society. It hasn't been going that badly, I suppose, all things considered. I had a checkup and vaccinations yesterday, which went well. My upper arms are a little bit sore, but that's the worst. And thankfully, I've had plenty of medical people to talk to about various mental health issues that had been exacerbated recently. My sister's having a routine medical thing, so my parents are going to go down soon to watch the kid for a couple of days. Video game wise, I did a little bit more of, after I played with my dad on the past weekend, I picked up Tears of the Kingdom a bit to just fool around with a bit more. I've done a little bit of Splatoon 3. I participated in the recent extra work, so feeling a little bit better about being able to enjoy stuff. Unfortunately, my Pathfinder game is not fully on hold for a couple of weeks, but sort of. We can't continue the main plot because a couple of our players can't be there for last week, next week, and we're not sure about the one after that. So we're doing some hex exploration and clearing stuff. But yeah, the last time we did a main setting, it ended on the sun disappearing, so something's going on. I think that's about all I got.
All right, I guess it's my go. Let's see. Big thing is this week is FEMA finally came around to do damage assessment. I'm like, so gonna have to go down to their office, which is apparently in a library. Don't ask me why. Like, and have to deal with that paperwork. Like, so outside of that, it's been a quiet week outside of the horror show and well, the kids being up here for Veterans Day. That is apparently a holiday that you get off from school. Like, I probably would have known that back when I was in school, but that's been a while. So, outside of that, I have finally finished Pillars of Eternity, clocking in at about 200 hours.
I was just about to make the joke of an eternity.
Like, not that long. I mean, it's not clocking in at like, someone putting time into like Factorio, like, or like any other game where there's like literally thousands of hours. And believe me, those exist.
Don't ask me about the time played in Final Fantasy XIV.
Indeed, for others it'd be WoW. Anyway, so just kind of been bounding through my collection here. That often happens when I've just gotten done with a major game. It's like,
and we're just starting break, so you can go chip away at some of that.
You'd think so, but here's the thing. As it so happens, during the break, I have a CRPG to review.
Ooh, yeah, that'll kill that real quick.
Yeah. I'm like, I've gone through the tutorial. Right now, I can sum it up as this is a much worse version of Pillars of Eternity. So that's not starting off on the best foot.
No.
Like I said, it plays a lot like Pillars of Eternity / the Infinity Engine games of yore, but it's a lot rougher. Like, oh boy. Anyway, so like,
is it one of those you're gonna think about bumping it just because you literally just went through Pillars of Eternity, or
no. Like, there's no, like, if I don't do it now while I have a adequate amount of time to play a CRPG, when am I going to do it?
valid?
Yeah. But some of the shorter games that I've been playing, shorter is relative here, since it includes things like The Ball, which is a first-person puzzle game, and it's not exactly a short game, but I don't know. I was reminded why I dropped it the first time. It's one of those games that uses a checkpoint saving system that has an absolutely awful checkpoint saving system. Like, it should be saving after I've done every, when it says area complete, but it doesn't do that. Like, one of those little things that seems innocuous but pisses you off when you quit a game and you load up and I'm like, oh, wait, I have all this stuff to replay. And it's like, it's not challenge replaying. It's, I've already done this. I've beaten this. I have to do it again. That's tedium. Kind of deal. And right now I'm playing through a, I guess now obscure 3D platformer called RoboBlitz. Like, if you were a if you were plugged into the early Xbox Live Arcade scene, you probably know what this is.
I
Because
probably have it on my Xbox. I just don't have that hooked up in front of me to look type deal.
Right. Well, it was like a year one Xbox Live Arcade game.
Right.
In fact, it got a lot of hype because it's like, technically speaking, the first Unreal Engine 3 game ever released.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, not the first Unreal Engine 3 thing ever released, because I believe a demo for The Last Remnant beat it to the punch.
Yeah.
But this was like the first actual game that used the new engine. Of course, since it's an Xbox Live Arcade game, a 2006 vintage Xbox Live Arcade game, it doesn't look all that. It doesn't look like, say, Batman: Arkham Asylum or Mirror's Edge or anything like that.
Right.
Constraints were pretty apparent.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I could go on. I also played Hebereki / Euphoria, which has a Steam release, surprisingly. It's a bit hard to recommend that version because it's a good game in a terrible Unity wrapper.
Oh, it's one of those unfortunate deals.
Yeah, it's like the game kept crashing, so I stopped playing it.
Yeah, and apparently Steam's telling me you started Icy.
Yeah, I played about an hour of that. I'm like, I'm not that impressed.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but also I played it back in 2019.
Like, it definitely feels like a bunch of games that I played for this show recently.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, back in 2019, before we were doing full-on reviews all the time, I could definitely see that you probably would have enjoyed it more then than now.
Yeah, like, it plays a lot like the Hunter X games or Hack, or, like I said, a whole bunch of stuff I've played for this thing here.
Yeah.
Just a bit less responsive, if I'm being honest. Like, it's a bit hard to turn off the reviewer portion of the brain.
Oh, yeah, that's never coming off, bro. Just accept it.
Anyway, so I think that'll about do it for the news, such it is. So merrily we shall be rolling on to the interview portion of the broadcast, and joining us once again is Jayson from Scarlet Moon.
Hello. Thanks for having me back.
Indeed. It's good to have you back. Maybe a bit longer than anticipated, but better late than never.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, so I believe last time we went into the overview portion of what Scarlet Moon does. So this time around, well, I suppose first I want to get into what Violet Moon does, because I don't think we had a chance to cover that.
Yeah, it was the first mistake, is asking what does Scarlet Moon do, because I can ramble on for hours on that topic. But yeah, Violet Moon is our sister company, so I can dive into that very briefly because it's less involved if you want me to.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mentioned last time I was on the program, we have we're a game music label, we have a record label, we do PR, we represent composers and so on. And in the course of doing PR work, we would promote a game soundtrack, sometimes a game soundtrack that we had worked on with our composer talent, and we were promoting the soundtrack for that game. And what would happen a couple times would be that we would do some PR campaign for a soundtrack, and then the developer would come to us a couple months later and say, hey, you did some PR work on the soundtrack. We really like what you did, and we don't have a PR partner for the game release, so would you be willing to do PR for the game? And Scarlet Moon is a game music company, so I wanted to keep Scarlet Moon focused on game music, but it seemed like a bad idea to say no. So we created this sister brand called Violet Moon Promotions, And I created this with a partner, David Bruno, who's been working in game PR for decades, and one of the first PR people I ever worked with in the industry, and still working on it to this day. And we spun this up, and we do any kind of PR work that we're doing that's more game focused and not touching on topics around game music. We channel through Violet Moon Promotions, and so that's really, I wanted to call it Azure Moon and have it be blue, but David voted for Violet. And the funny thing is, when we had Scarlet Moon and Violet Moon, and Scarlet Moon started in 2013, and Violet Moon was probably like 2016 or 2017. And then a couple years ago, a little-known franchise called Pokemon announced their latest titles for Pokemon Violet and Scarlet. And so there's a pretty interesting coincidence where where the games came out, and we were able
people
to
just start suddenly searching the phrase Violet, and oh look, you start picking up on search results.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, and I guess people came to the conclusion that Violet and Scarlet were the opposite ends of the visual spectrum: ultraviolet light and infrared. And I guess we just happened to chance upon that a few years earlier, and so it was just kind of funny that we ended up with the same name as these two Pokemon titles. And yeah, so that's Violet Moon in a nutshell. Yeah, it's easier and didn't take up a whole hour of time. So
right, and I suppose it's worth asking. What games has Violet Moon published so far?
So we don't necessarily publish games. We work primarily to work with a developer or publisher to kind of co-promote their game title. But some game projects we recently worked on the PR front.
Okay.
The biggest one is probably the most recent one was a campaign we did with Infinity Knight's Cross, which was on Kickstarter. Maybe you saw that one. It's this game being developed by three brothers who are in Australia, and they are making a 3-player couch co-op 16-bit style RPG game. And because of the 3-player co-op, they thought it kind of fit in with Secret of Mana, so they originally reached out to us to hire Hiroki Kikuta, the composer of Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana, to do some music for this game. And it was the same situation where, well, hey, we're going to have this Kickstarter campaign. You said you did some PR work, so is that something you would be willing to do for us? So we worked with them on announcing the game and announcing their Kickstarter. And I think they raised something like $200,000 on Kickstarter. And what else have we been working on? We worked briefly with Wired Productions on Arcade Paradise VR. They had a nice music tie-in that we jumped on and helped them with. And there's a couple other things we're working on right now that aren't announced, so those will be out in the wild soon. You know how it goes. And so, yeah, that's kind of what keeps us busy.
Right. So do you or Bruno handle the Violet Moon stuff more?
So we tag team it, and in fact, I do a lot. And this ties into when you're doing a game music campaign, it's usually a one-off thing. You're promoting a soundtrack, or you're promoting some album that's out, or you're promoting a concert, or so on. And so if it's a game project that really is just kind of a one-off, hey, we're going to have this one event that we need some PR support for, I tend to handle that. When it comes to long-term strategic planning around a robust PR campaign for a long duration of time, and how do you sequence things, and when should we send out press releases, and when should we do outreach, and what events should we try to hit up, I defer to David, because he's had a whole career and decades in PR work, and has that expertise, whereas I can just basically hop in and do a one-off thing. So we kind of split it that way. and it's worked pretty well. And again, just like we do with the Scarlet Moon on the music side, it's really a service that's geared towards indie game developers and a lot of the larger PR agencies. There's a lot of PR agencies now that service indie games, but traditionally, a lot of the
I'm
PR
aware.
agencies that served some larger scale publishers had very high, they had less flexibility, we'll say, in how they structured their how they structured the price for their services and how long you had to kind of be on board, over the course of time. And I think what we do is we try to offer a la carte service and find out what people are trying to get with the promotion, and then we can kind of tailor a program to fit the budget and the needs, just like we do on the music side. So, I take a lot of pride in being able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually a rare opportunity for us to highlight a invisible backbone of the video game industry, because we talk a lot with game developers and marketing people from developers, but we hardly get like the dedicated PR people on the program, like even though we work with a whole bunch of them of various sorts. So it can be illuminating in its own way.
What I find fascinating, really, and I guess I've always been somebody in the industry, as previously somebody who was as we went into depth last time, kind of from a journalistic background, and I would say enthusiast media more so than journalism. But I've always kind of taken pleasure in putting people together, introducing people I know to each other and watching them do cool stuff together. And I continue to do that. I do represent talent now, so I kind of get paid to do that a little bit now as well. But I still like putting people together, even if I don't represent them. And it's something that we have on our website now, because people pointed this out, is really, we offer what is essentially free consultation, whether it's, how do I get the most bang for my buck with my audio budget? What can you do? What do you recommend? Are these song lengths too long? Do we have too much music? What makes sense for a game our size? What kind of talent should we work with? All these kinds of questions that developers have, and I'm happy to answer those questions, just kind of included. And the same thing on the PR side. It's like, well, what are your goals? What is it what are you trying to achieve? Like, are you going to increase your game sales, so much that you're going to pay for any engagement that you have with us? And these are the questions that come up, and people have pointed out to me like, oh, well, do you charge for the consultation? And it's like, no. Like, we get paid for when we actually provide you a service. And I guess you could say information is a service. You can certainly find a lot of information online through channels, but I found it fascinating just how many kind of quote consultants there are these days who want to charge you for information, because it is pretty widespread. I see on my social media that everyone is a consultant now. So maybe I'm just doing it wrong. I don't know.
I'm like, I can't really speak to that since, not really our field, so to speak, but I get where you're coming from. And it is good that, you can provide even free advice in this world. Anyway, getting back on track, so to speak, I'm wondering, is one site more difficult to promote than the other? Or yes. Okay, so which one?
Finish your thought there. Sorry.
Okay. So which one?
Game music is very hard to promote, and most of our, there's different channels through which you can promote. Channels that you can, maybe we tend to do press releases, and that's kind of our primary channel of distributing information. And who we distribute that to is largely gaming press and enthusiast media, and some small smattering of streamers and these kinds of folks. And when you just try to you think about what the volume of game releases are alone, right? And you see this all the time. There was just an article the other day on, which is the game industry. I get the email. It's gameindustry.biz. And the article was about how kind of the big challenge for indies right now. And it's stuff that's not surprising. It's funding and visibility. But you think about this visibility issue, and we get questions about this, like, oh, we're going to go on Kickstarter, and can you help us get more visibility? And it gets back to that consultation and conversation about what do you want to get out of this engagement. Because if you want us to do a press release and send it to all the biggest websites, the IGNs and GameSpots and Polygons, etc., about your indie game that's on Kickstarter, what is your guess as to how much pickup they're going to get from you sending that press release? It's going to be zero. So, they're not going to, unless the only way to really get attention is if you have some big name, game developer who has a history in the industry, who's doing something, and blah blah blah. And so
yeah, I feel like without a big name, music is in generally kind of hard to promote unless you've heard it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the point I'm making is that games are bigger news than game music. Game music is an extreme niche of games, and it's an extreme niche of music. And so the idea is if games are having a hard time getting visibility, and indie games are having a hard time getting visibility, and music, mainstream commercial music is having a hard time getting visibility because it's just so saturated, you can imagine that being in the niche space of game music, that it's even more difficult to get attention. And so a lot of the game music stuff that ends up on these sites, they end up in like the header, the categories they get put in are stuff like, culture, it's like a culture post talking about game music or a game music concert or these kinds of things. And basically you're kind of it's a crapshoot in terms of like, if it's a busy news day for games, you can guess that most outlets are not going to pick up a news story about game music. It's just not their audience. It's not the priority. But if it's a slow news day and they're looking for something, or they just happen to be an avid fan of whatever it is that you have to talk about, then you might, we've done some, just in this last 2 weeks, we did some PR campaigns for partners. One was for an artist named Brazen who did a release called Celeste's Secret Hideaway, and we did our campaign and they ended up on Engadget. Or we just did a campaign last week for Game Chops' Zelda and Jazz 2 album, and that ended up on Polygon. So it just happened to be that, maybe Zelda is a big deal, or maybe Celeste is a big deal, but you can imagine if there was big game news, despite Celeste and Zelda being big franchises, a game music tribute album to those franchises would probably fall pretty low on the totem pole of priorities in terms of what they need to tell their audience about. So we were fortunate to get that coverage. A lot of times on the game music stuff, when we do our internal releases, and my time is... basically, I can put as much time into it as I want because I'm not paying, for that time. I tend to do a lot of exclusive placements. So let me go find this Famitsu or GameSpot or whoever it is, and say, hey, let me incentivize you to actually talk about our project that you probably wouldn't have time to talk about, even if you're interested, by giving you some exclusive tidbit or a preview or an announcement, so that this piece of media is exclusive to your website. And I tend to find that that's one way to get folks to actually pay attention to game music. But it's tough. It's tough for games, so it's even more tough for music. And so, yeah, that's kind of the situation.
I'm like, yeah, not surprised when you lay it out like that, because especially when it comes to the indie scene. Unfortunate as it is, I mean, this topic has been raging on our program and elsewhere for quite some time. And it doesn't get any less distressing because, there's just more and more product getting released. So,
yeah. And I don't think there's anything special that a PR person, they're going to have some expertise and some, when you're hiring a PR, you could, if you're making a game, and I've seen developers do this, I've seen developers be very successful with the press and with streamers and so on. It just takes a lot of time. You can imagine trawling through the internet to find all of the big outlets and who to contact and send out customized emails and reach out to all these streamers and build your own list and reach out to them whenever you have something to say about your game. Anyone can do that. It's just a matter of time. I don't think it takes a lot of skill to do that. It just takes time. And so what you're really paying a PR person for is that time of you're paying them for access to the list. It's like, how do I reach 1,000 people in a course of a month-long engagement, instead of me having to spend 6 months of doing it 2 hours a day to build a list that's probably smaller, and then I have to establish those relationships and those kinds of things. I mean, granted, a publicist, anyone working in this space, is going to have some level of expertise that they bring to the table, but I think the bulk of the value really comes from access to that list quickly, and it's something that anyone can do themselves if they have the time. And I've seen several instances where a game developer, two-person operation, has compiled a very impressive list and has gotten people interested in talking about their game. So, I think it's having something. It's one of the questions people will bring some indie game soundtrack to me, and I'll say, how did the game do? And they'll say it didn't do well. And then I say, well, how do you think it's going to go over when we promote the soundtrack? It's going to be, something has to be extremely notable in itself for you to promote it. You're just telling people that it's there. Mm-hmm. And so if it's something that's not noteworthy in itself and you're promoting it, it's not going to get traction.
True enough, as painful as it is to say,
Yep.
Believe me, once again, that's a story we've certainly heard ourselves on the program. Maybe not so much about the music, as honestly, in our experience, when it comes to the music, that's like the least, not focused upon, but like that's the element that the developers work on the least. In the sense that there are not many developers who want to do the composing. Like they will get somebody else to do that, somebody dedicated.
Yeah, that seems quite often to be the case. I've certainly talked to a lot of developers who want to try it, and what I tell them is, try it. It's a good idea. I think you should try it. The worst that will come out of it is you'll say, wow, that's really difficult, and have better insight into when you do hire somebody, you can better direct them because you have a better sense of what it is that goes into it. A lot of people have a friend, I have a friend who does music. And I always say, it's great to have friends in music because it's a tough thing to pick up and learn. And so a lot of people will have somebody that, they have a friend who does music and they bring them into it. And then a lot of people, they find a solution. I think it's the same with anything, right? If you find a plumber who does a really good job at your house, you probably will stick with that plumber next time you have a plumbing problem. So if you have a composer that you happen to hire and they did a pretty good job and it was a comfortable work experience for you and you were generally satisfied with the output and how the work went, then next time you have a game project, you'll probably work with that composer again. So I always have people, I'm sorry, unfortunately we have, this composer that we worked with last time who we're going to work with this time. And it's like, no, like, that's great. Like, we really appreciate when people have return business for us. So we definitely appreciate that you're taking return business to a composer that you worked with, that you had a good experience with. So yeah, I guess the big debate now is AI, right? Is AI going to take some? There's so many composers out there, and it's like, well, okay, now here's another thing coming down the pike that's going to maybe compete.
But really, why should we bother listening to music that nobody could even bother writing?
Yeah, and it's the situation of, like, this is how I explain it to people who are worried about it. It's like, well, there's people now who go and either find free use music that they can put in their project, or they pay $25 for access to some sound bank, and then they can use that music. And it's like, not every game. You're working on some mobile game, whatever, some small game. Not every game needs the composer of Final Fantasy on it. Not every RPG needs the composer of Final Fantasy on it. And it's like, okay, so there's certain cases where music that isn't fantastic is good enough. And I think it's going to be those same folks and those same projects that I don't think AI music is there yet, but soon it will be. It'll be, quote, good enough to where, it serves some project that doesn't need to have audio excellence. And that's fine, because I think, I guess what's scary is maybe eventually it'll get really good. And then people will start losing jobs. But right now, we, quote, lose jobs to people who use Creative Commons or free use or pay for a sample pack anyway. So it's going to be those same people who would use AI music.
Like, that remains to be seen. It's like, the thing is, AI, it can't create. It can only piece together. It cannot generate anything new. But, I guess we'll see how things pan out. Like, anyway, so spinning things back to Scarlet Moon, I suppose it's a good time to talk about some of the recent projects that you've been involved with. Like the Zero Escapes, Zero Time Dilemma original soundtrack.
Oh, yeah, we put that on there. So that's actually not a new one. That was, so we have our company, so I talked about channels for promotion, and, one channel might be sending a press release through email to press and put it in press release repositories. Another channel would be social media, and another channel could be the company blog, which we have, and we do interview. This kind of ties back into my history and game enthusiast, as a game enthusiast media person, writing interviews and reviews and stuff. So I tend to, get an itch to write and share my opinion about some music stuff. And so we have some interviews, most recently on our blog with the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth lead composer, Mitsuru Suzuki. We had an interview with him. We had an interview with the 3 composers on Visions of Mana, that's on the blog as well. And then I just published the other day my thoughts on one of the albums that one of our composers, Shinji Hosoe, who's known for a lot of different things, but largely Ridge Racer and a lot of shmup games in the 80s and 90s. And he's done the music for the Zero Escape series. And a couple of years ago, his record label, Super Sweep Records, put out the Zero Time Dilemma soundtrack. And so I shared my thoughts on that. There's the caveat that this is a composer that I represent, so I don't label that content as a quote review, because it is more promotional in nature for a talent that we do represent. But yeah, I think the quickest place to find out, quote, what we've been working on is probably like our Bandcamp page. And the most recent stuff, we had a very busy summer on the label. Do you recall when I was on last?
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, because I know we had a busy summer with 7 album releases in a span of 3 months, and I was pretty burnt out. But working our way backwards, right now we're working on our Christmas album that always comes out around Black Friday, so you can expect a new Christmas album. And our Christmas series is game music arranged in Christmas style, or remixes of Christmas standards or original kind of holiday-inspired tunes. And this year we have on it, that same composer I mentioned from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Mitsuru Suzuki. He has an electronic duo that he does outside of work called Mojera, and so they have a remix of a Kraftwerk song that they've done in kind of an icy holiday style that's going to be on there. And one of our Discord moderators, who's a composer, did a fun Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree remix called Shoppin' Around the Christmas Tree, which is it's kind of a mashup of Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree in the style of the Wii Shopping channel. So it's kind of a fun sound there. And we have a version of Silent Night and some original music in the chiptune and 16-bit sounds. And so that's a fun project that is going to be out this month. And then most recently, we had our Halloween album that came out in October. It's the same kind of idea, but Halloween music. And this is our third volume of that. And that album had on it Soyo Oka, who's a composer we work with. She's known for her soundtracks to Super Mario Kart and Pilot Wings on the Super Nintendo. So she wrote an original song on her Halloween album. And then we had really fun. So Scarlet Moon and I, we're based out of San Diego, California. And there's a composer who lives here named George the Fat Man Sanger. And he is... You know, he was on this program
twice. The Fat Man of Austin.
There again, now he's the Fat Man of San Diego. Yes. So he did a remix, a performance. He has a band. He lives in this area of San Diego called Coronado, which is a ritzy island that's off the bay of San Diego here, and he has a band called Los Coronados. And so he was able to get his band together and do a surf rock, which is very San Diegan, arrangement of his main theme from The Seventh Guest, which is a soundtrack that he composed in the 90s. So his band did the surf rock remix, and then he had some local players on it, and he included jazz, I will say legend, keyboardist Adam Holzman, who is recording artist in his own right, but has performed with Miles Davis and is just an incredible jazz keyboardist. So that was a really cool track that we had on our Halloween album. And there was so much San Diego connection across this album, Scarlet Moon Halloween Volume 3, that we were actually featured in our local San Diego Reader magazine. So they did a write-up of this album. Interestingly enough, the cover picture they had for the story was some person with a guitar that they said was me. I said, Jayson Napoitano from Scarlet Moon. And I was like, who is this person? And we have no idea where they got the picture from. And in fact, when we did a reverse Google search of that picture to find out where it appears on the internet, to see if there's another person named Jayson Napoitano, Google said, there's no instances of that image on the internet.
Oh, that's fun.
So was it an AI picture or what? That was the running joke on our Discord, figuring out who this person was. But that was all fun. And then we had our summer of craziness with a Shovel Knight tribute album, a jazz album dedicated to ActRaiser, some indie game soundtracks, and that's kind of what's been up lately. Clock Tower Rewind came out last month.
Yes.
You Clock Tower fans?
We had the creative lead.
Oh.
Yeah, we had Way Forward on to talk about it.
Well, now you have us on, and one of our main composers also in San Diego is Dale North. He did all of the new music for the comic strips or some sort of cinematic sequences, comics that were in the game. He did all the music for that. And he's the one who did the music for the vocal themes, and there were two of them. One of them was with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, was that her name? From, I guess, what is that, Silent Hill fame? Now I'm looking it up to make sure I'm not speaking. It's like three names, and so yeah. And so she did the main theme, and then our internal talent, Emmy Evans, who's known for the vocals on Nier, she did a theme on that soundtrack as well. So kind of a star-studded cast of vocalists on Clock Tower Rewind. So we were fortunate to work on that. We worked on Contra Operation Galuga with Way Forward, and we've been busy. You know, it's good to have a lot of what do they say? It's good to have a lot of irons in the fire. There we go. That's what I was trying to come up with. So between all of our different service lines and talent that we represent, there's always something going on. So, maybe I'll come talk to you again in 6 months, and there'll be a whole new slate of things that we're up to.
Probably, given what's transpired between then and now.
Yeah.
I suppose on that measure, what live music and concert appearances have you promoted lately?
Ooh. So maybe there hasn't. So there was a whole kind of dead zone with all the pandemic and all of that stuff. And in fact, the person who we had contracted with somebody, another agent, to help find us in-person opportunities to play at conventions and these other kinds of things. And because everything during the pandemic was shut down and there were no live performances, in fact they closed shop, and we're no longer able to pitch us to organizations that were doing that kind of thing. So I have to admit, we've been kind of lax in promoting live event stuff. There's a couple things here in San Diego that there's going to be a San Diego anime convention this weekend in San Diego. It's their second annual one. We really wanted to come up with something there, but it's I kind of got on it too late, and so maybe next year we'll try to put something together. You might be aware that TwitchCon was in San Diego this year and will be here for the next 5 years. And so I was able to check that out and peruse, and there's a main stage that they have, and Yamaha and Roland were both there and had their own stages as well. So who knows, maybe you'll see some of our talent at TwitchCon next year. We would love to do a show around GDC. That would be fantastic. So we're always thinking about these things. We have a lot of artists who do live performance, especially our jazz duo. So definitely, we will we're thinking about it, and we'd love to do it. It's just a matter of finding the right opportunity.
It definitely sounds like you're formulating in that area. It is unfortunate that it had to get so negatively impacted as so many other things did by the pandemic.
Yeah. We had a couple. We were actually talking about 2 different engagements with different talents right before all of that happened. So, it's kind of starting back at square one.
Right. Not really sure what else to say in that direction. Hopefully, things pick up in the next year.
Yep. And if, my key thing too is if we do a live performance, it would be great to broadcast it, so people that's the thing is like sometimes a band will come up and say, hey, a game music cover band will come and say, hey, we're doing this show. And we want to promote it. And it's like, okay, well, you understand if we do promotion, if you're doing a show in California, people in New York don't care, in that kind of situation. So it's like, hey, if you're going to live stream your show, then it has global appeal because anyone can tune in and hear what you're doing. So that'll be a big thing for me. I would love to record it and make like a live, if I get Gentle Love, who does our sleep albums, they do jazz improv. So every time they perform it, it's going to be different, right? So if you heard the album Prescription for Sleep Undertale, and we were to perform that whole album live, it would be a completely different take on those themes because it's improvised. And so I would love to record whatever it is we end up doing and make that available as an album as well. So, all these ideas are spinning.
Yeah. Now, do you have to worry about the DCMA in those cases?
Yeah, that's tough. First of all, when you perform the music, you really should have it cleared with the copyright holder. So that's one thing. Especially if you're going to try to record it and sell it, it's imperative that you do. In terms of all the rights and when we release music, we we specifically uncheck all of the rights claiming, so that people don't get hit with that stuff, because it is really frustrating. And I think when it comes to a I don't know. So that's a good question. Is if you're performing a arrangement of Undertale music, is it able to pick that up? It's not the same sound source. So is it able, I think it is to some degree able to pick up the melody and say that sounds like this song that this person owns.
Sometimes it does trigger, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on how close it is, really.
Yeah. So it's an interesting world we're living in. And so that's why it's important to clear that stuff ahead of time, with the copyright holder.
Right. It can be especially thorny in other nations. Like, people think the United States is bad. Try Germany or Japan.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah. One fun piece of news that I have is that we have a bunch of physical merchandise, and we had some CDs for our Sleep series that we did, kind of these limited edition sets that had, foil print on the cover and a big 20-page booklet with an interview and comics and stickers and all this stuff. And we also had some vinyl products that were made of some of our albums. And we were distributing all of this stuff through a company called Ship to Shore, who've been around a long time, and they shut down this year. They were purchased, and then the new owner decided to close the business. And so all of our physical merchandise was kind of in limbo. And we've been able to secure that and bring it. We've been able to secure that inventory, and I'm in the process of ramping up a shipping operation. So one cool thing that we're going to be doing, and I already started, is I've already started with our CD products, which is Prescription for Sleep Celeste and Prescription for Sleep Shovel Knight. Is we've made these available for sale again, and can start shipping those out. And soon, I'm kind of dreading it. I'm going to be having all of our vinyl product shipped to me, and it's something like 1,000 vinyl records that I'm going to have to store, but start shipping those out as well. So that's one exciting development recently too. It's been in the last month or two.
I suppose it's worth asking how big the shipping operation is. Are you just shipping across the country, or are you doing international as well?
International, through Bandcamp. And when I say a shipping operation, it's me.
It's me. It's always me.
Yeah, it's
Send
me
help.
getting the orders through Bandcamp and using, feeding that into another system and taking care of the shipping and packaging it up. And I did this when we did Prescription for Sleep Undertale. We printed 1,000 of those, and I shipped like 600 of them out of my house. And it was like a big, it was arts and crafts time and cutting labels and taping stuff and going to the post office constantly. Now it's like, got a label printer and you print it and you just slap it on the bag and put it in, the USPS will pick it up at your front door. And so it's less of a lift now than it was even, 8 years ago. I can't believe that was 8 years ago. Geez.
The time it flies.
What do you mean time marches forward? What sorcery is this?
Well, the thing is, I always talk about this too. It's as you get older, time goes by faster, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, it's this kind of like each year as you get older is a shorter portion of your lived experience. So I think that's why, you could think back to when you were, I have young kids. And so I constantly am thinking like, oh, my kid is this age. And when I was that age, this is what I was doing. And you have this distorted idea of like what you were doing at certain ages. Like I was like, oh yeah, I was totally like, playing through Final Fantasy 1 with my friend when I was 5 years old. And, you look at your 5-year-old and you're like, wow, they can't even like hold a controller, barely, barely. They could do anything. So I definitely was not playing through Final Fantasy 1 when I was 5. But you also get this distorted element of time where it's like, you remember a summer when you were a kid playing some of these games, and you're like, oh yeah, that was this huge amount of time. Like when you were a kid, a whole summer was, 10% of your life. And now you've had so many summers, it's like, oh yeah, that was just a drop in the bucket. And like, oh, I blinked my eyes and now it's another year. And COVID also contributed to that too, because everybody was stuck inside. It's like, oh yeah, it was 5 years ago that I did all these things that felt like they were 2 years ago.
What do you mean it's not summer anymore? What do you mean I put shorts away? What the hell?
Okay. In fairness,
Sorry.
that's just the weather speaking.
Fair.
Anyway,
right, I can end it there on a depressing note about how we're all getting old. And
well, let's not do that.
all right.
Give us some positive news to end this interview with.
The positive news. I see. I already blew it. I already shared. We got physical CDs. We got vinyl. We got Christmas album with all these cool guests on it. Other than rehashing all that stuff I said, that can end us on a positive note.
Oh, I know what we can do. I can ask you. Can you tell us anything you've got lined up for 2025 yet?
Oh, geez. Yeah. So I was just in Japan in October. And I made it a point to meet with our team of composers and music talent there. And I did. I had breakfast with Norihiko Hibino, who's the saxophone player and leader of. I also met the piano player of our Gentle Love, the duo that does all the jazz music. So I got to meet Ayaki, the pianist, for the first time, and I got to talk to Hibino-san. And I said, "Hey, we have these jazz albums. They've done well. We've charted on Billboard. We have 13 albums in the series." And, each year there's more and more music that gets released, and the numbers have kind of been dwindling. And he said, oh, well, why don't we try branching out and exploring some other kind of music and other audiences and stuff. So one thing that we're going to be doing next year that I haven't really told anybody about, so you're hearing it first, is we're going to be doing a bunch of releases in different kinds of media. So we might have an album dedicated to pop music. We might have an album dedicated to some anime properties, other kinds of areas. And so that'll be fun to explore and get to do. And interestingly enough, the duo is called Gentle Love. And we got that name from an album that Hibino-san had done. I don't remember which year it was. It must have been in the early 2010s, perhaps. I'm kind of stalling because I'm Googling it as we're talking. But he did an album called Gentle Love. It was April 24th, 2009. And it was Norihiko Hibino. Gentle Love was the album title, and it was pop music that he had done from Japan, the US, and some other places. Some of the songs on here were, where is it? There was like the Young and the Restless theme. Yeah, Nadia's theme from The Young and the Restless. And he even had Chinese pop music on here and Spanish pop music here. And so he had done this album. It was all pop arrangements, jazz pop arrangements, called Gentle Love. And we took that name for the duo. And so now it's going to be coming full circle to do another pop album. Now that we, I guess that'll be 15, 16 years later. Jeez. Where did the time go? How was that possible?
I was still in high school at that point.
2009. I don't know if the album's available anywhere, but I'm going to put it in the chat here. If you go to VGMDB, which is my favorite source for all game music and game music composer content, it's like an IMDb for game music. If you type Gentle Love, you'll find the album, and there was 2 of them. And yeah. So that's what's going on. Hopefully that's exciting. For 2025. There's another project we did with Kikuta where he wrote an original song, and rather than just release a single that would go off into the void, and maybe a few people would stream, and maybe 5 people would buy it for 99 cents. We decided to have a lot of our Scarlet Moon team do like their own remix of it, including Gentle Love did a version of it. So we kind of have this whole EP now of a really cool song that Secret of Mana composer Hiroki Kikuta did, with some remixes, and that should be out next year as well.
Okay, then. So I think I'm good. What about you guys?
I think I'm good.
I think everything I asked, I've piped in with.
All right. Hey,
All right.
Jayson.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. I really appreciate your questions. They're really good questions and really get to the bottom of what we do. So it's really great. I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
We do aim to please on that front. Once again, maybe we'll have you back on the program in 2025. Maybe we'll have somebody you represent on the program next year. Who knows? But in
You
the
should get me and
meantime,
George get me and George on together. I would love to. George is such a cool guy. I would love to we could fat it up with the fat man.
it's been a few years, so yeah, we could throw a bone that way eventually. It's like. Anyway, in the meantime, so where can people find your physical CDs and vinyl and all that business?
Well, at my house, but I'm not going to tell you where that is. No, I'm just kidding. If you go to scarletmoonrecords.bandcamp.com, in fact, you will find there's a tab on Bandcamp called Merch, and you can click on there, and it'll all be listed there. So that's going to be our primary landing page for all of the physical products. So scarletmoonrecords.bandcamp.com, and we'll be sharing on social media. So we'll be blasting it out and making sure people know that it's there.
Good. Right. So, Petty, play us to the next segment.
All right, give me 1 second.
It's fine. Hurry. All right. So, welcome to the topic of discussion. Right. So, this week we are doing a follow-up. We are revisiting Pal World, the Nintendo lawsuit, because a few days ago, last week, I want to say, we got a big update on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Some key pieces of information that I mentioned were missing when this thing broke have been revealed. Specifically, the patents that are being infringed, and what Nintendo is actually seeking. So, to get into it, Nintendo is seeking $65,000. I forget the yen amounts.
It's a few hundred thousand yen.
It's a pathetically small amount of money on a company scale.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but that's
because they're also seeking for a major injunction.
Yeah. Here we go. It's 5 million yen plus late payment damages. But the real sticking point is an injunction against Power. Now, it is worth mentioning that this is in Japanese court, so presumably that's an injunction just in Japan.
Because, this, as far as I can tell, there isn't anything like US wise that they're breaking. It's just Japan.
Right. Yeah. So I suppose we'll have to see how that gets meted out. Should this play in court? I'd imagine it will, because I'll be honest, I do not know how this works because it's Japanese court system, etc., etc. If it were American, I'd say they'd probably settle out of court.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's an option in Japan.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to get into the actual patents, let's see. I'm trying to, um, yeah. Two of the patents in question are related to a presence of a success rate indicator for catching monsters and redeploying of them to fight and gather resources. Meanwhile, the third concerns both players riding various monsters as a means of transport, as well as the ability for the game to auto switch which monsters is being ridden depending on the terrain.
It's a little bit hard to get much out of the legalese, but the short form is they're pretty much all seem to be about stuff you do specifically in Legends Arceus.
Right.
And
well, the third
there are arguments to be made about when these things were actually patented or whatever, but the short form is that they're probably doing this being aggressively defensive about Pal World making a huge deal with Sony and stuff.
Well, they have to be.
Mhm.
Like, if they aren't super aggressive about this stuff, then it gets lost. So now, with the third patent here, it's pretty obvious what they're talking about. They're talking about riding Pokemon and the mechanics therein. The first two is very under the hood stuff. And yeah, what Galax is referring to is the trio of mechanics appeared in Pokemon Legend Arceus, which launched in January 2022. Nintendo and TBC did not file their respective divisional patent applications until long after the release of Pal World, which launched 2 years later in January 2024. Here's the thing, though. That's not a necessarily indicator of things, because these things can take years.
And like what you said, like the late patent stuff, that's partly why they can't really do a whole lot here in the US. Because if it comes out, like if you file your patents after or complete after something comes out, not a whole lot they can do.
Following the long-established United States legal tradition of finders, keepers, looters, weepers.
I mean, basically.
Yeah. But this is about what I was expecting when this news hit, because, if you remember, and it's a thing that does persist to this day, though not as much as it when the news first broke. It's like they're not suing over the designs of the Power World creatures, because that's not a patent,
right?
That would be a copyright lawsuit, not a patent infringement case. It's like, I figured it was going to be it was mechanical, and it was going to be deep mechanics. And yeah, on 2 counts it is. I would not call being able to ride Pokemon a not a deep mechanic, but it's tightly integrated. But it's something that people can pick up on.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not specific just that you can ride them. It's also that, like, while you're riding it, it can contextually switch from flying to climbing to swimming.
Yeah. Because just riding on an animal is not something they can really, patent.
Yeah, no, that would be way too broad. And let's be honest, being able to ride creatures is something that's been in video games for literally decades.
Yeah,
I mean, for fuck's sakes,
not
Nintendo
since the start, but it's been like easily since the second or third generation of gaming.
Yeah. Oh, right, and the so here's some deeper information on what these first 2 patents are. The first alludes to a system where a player aims and fires an item towards a character in a field, and in doing so triggers combat. So what they're talking
the thing where you throw out your ball from a range to start combat with a Pokemon, and also the thing where you throw out your ball to make your Pokemon get resources from a node.
Yeah.
And the two separate counts.
Yeah. The second is very similar, but seems to be more directly focused on tweaking previous patents in being able to capture Pokemon in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, that's the really technical one. The most technical, I'd say, because all of these have technicalities because they have to. Because, capturing things with an item in and of itself, it would be way too broad of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think Arabian Nights would have some problems with the Pokemon Company here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just to name one example. So, as it stands, it's hard to say where things lie. Because putting aside like the soapbox commentary of whether or not these patents should exist, I'm like, that doesn't really matter because they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to go away just because people think that they shouldn't exist. It's like copyright. Yeah.
More precisely, the thing to do there is for whoever does Pal World, I forget their name, to countersue on those patents and say that they're not valid because they're too generic or something if they think they have a case for that. Well, it's for the courts to deal with.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing here. Pocket Pair hasn't launched a countersuit. But once again, I'm not exactly sure if that's a thing in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
We
are very not up on Japanese law over here at Fragments of Silicon.
Especially like Japanese patent.
Hey, I know a lot. I played Ace Attorney once.
Well, like Ace Attorney is...
I know, I'm kidding.
Well, Ace Attorney is a spoof of the criminal court system.
Yes, that's criminal law. This is contract law.
Yeah. So, like, even on that venue, that it doesn't apply. So, how this all will shape up, I couldn't say. But obviously, Pocket Pair isn't agreeing that they've infringed the patent, all that stuff. But I figured, but things are proceeding generally where I thought they would. It's like I knew this information would come out once the legal stuff had been served, because I gotta imagine this is a pretty consistent principle in most countries. You got to know what you've been accused of being violent. What's been violated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and indeed that is the case. And also, a lot of it is very technical, because that's how patented stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's it's hard to make a judgment call here because we are not familiar with the system of law here. On the other hand, if I had to go in terms of who has the power, who has the money, who has the favoritism, it would be Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because they're the billion-dollar company. They're the ones who can afford the high-priced lawyers.
Yeah, because I don't think either Microsoft or Sony is going to come bail them out on this one.
No, they're an independent company.
Mm-hmm. They're not going to pony up the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, to go battle Nintendo in court.
Yeah. Well, with one exception, if one of them ends up buying the company,
Yeah.
then they will inherit that litigation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I don't think that, either of them are going to do that. Call it a hunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose we'll have more on this once we get more, or like if the trial gets underway and all that business. But it was definitely worth revisiting this. Now that we've gotten more details. And I think that's all I've got on this particular topic at this particular moment in time.
Yeah. Because, like, I don't think we've actually talked about Pal World on air, but that's more one of those things, like, I don't think any of us are really interested in it.
Yeah, I am not interested in it for reasons that are completely separate from how much it is and isn't like Pokemon.
Yeah.
I'm not
Right.
interested in it because I'm not really interested in survival crafting games.
Similar, yeah.
No, that makes sense.
If this would have came out, like, back when I was in high school, I probably would have been more interested. But now that I am in my early 30s, I kind of don't have the time to sit down and do survival crafting stuff.
Yep. Anyway, so yeah, that'll about do it for the topic of discussion, and that'll about do it for this episode of Fragments of Silicon. Indeed, that'll do it for season 20. So, we'll be back in December, or rather, we do have a special in between Thanksgiving holiday special, which is actually something I was planning for Halloween, but thank you, late arriving materials. Though we do have to make sure that everything works, but there'll be time to do that.
Right.
But I guess in terms of what we're planning, playing a multiplayer showcase of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Again, I requested this for Halloween. The games did not show up on my email doorstep until like the Halloween afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And the game is fucking over 50 gigs.
Yeah.
So this wasn't happening.
I mean, it could have. It would take a lot of extra effort, but it could have.
Yeah, I wasn't going to put in the extra effort when, this is kind of why I needed it before, but,
Such is life.
Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, until next season, I shall wish you good gaming.